It began with something small, something easy to dismiss. A faint melody coming through the vents late at night. A woman's voice humming in a low register, soft and soulful. When Michael and Dana Brooks moved into the Benedict Canyon property, they knew it once belonged to Natalie Cole. The realtor mentioned it casually. You know, this will be Natalie Cole's place, back in the 2000s, but the couple thought of it as trivia, not a warning. The first few nights were peaceful. The house, perched on a slope beneath eucalyptus trees, had that nostalgic 1960s architecture Natalie loved: clean lines, wide glass panes, a recording nook that overlooked the canyon lights. But by the fourth evening, Dana awoke at 3:14 a.m. to the distinct scent of cigarette smoke. She sat up, disoriented. Neither of them smoked. The air was still, but the smell was rich, heavy like an old jazz club, with a trace of perfume behind it. Michael brushed it off as old house smells. Yet 2 nights later, he caught the same scent near the home studio. Inside, the temperature had dropped several degrees, though the air conditioning was off. The light switch flickered when he touched it. Then he noticed an old photograph tacked behind a cabinet, half torn, showing Natalie in her studio. Her smile was calm, but the photo edges were curled, as if handled recently. The next morning, they asked their neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kent, about the house's past. She smiled tightly. Natalie was a night person, she said. Sometimes, I'd see lights flicker in that back room at 2, 3 in the morning. She'd be recording, whisper singing to herself. Even after she passed, her caretaker swore he'd hear her voice now, and then thought it was just his grief talking. That night, Dana decided to test it. She set her phone to record audio in the studio from midnight till dawn. At first, the playback revealed nothing but silence. But around 2:47 a.m., a faint hum bled through a woman's tone, nearly inaudible, repeating what sounded like the first bars of Unforgettable. Dana froze. She played it again and again, comparing it to Natalie's recording. The pitch was identical. Michael tried to rationalize it. Maybe a neighbor's speaker or a passing car radio. But the house sat deep in the canyon, no close neighbors, no traffic that late. And when they tried the same test the next night, the humming returned, this time closer, clearer. Then came the lights. Each evening around the same time, a soft amber glow pulsed from the studio's frosted window, like someone pacing with a candle inside. Dana watched it from the driveway one night, trembling. She swore she saw the faint silhouette of a woman's shoulders slightly hunched, holding something, maybe a microphone. Michael called an electrician who checked every wire, every breaker, even the solar panel system. Everything's clean, he said. But this studio's got a strange loop. Someone rewired it for sound isolation. You could almost get electromagnetic feedback if someone left certain connections active. That led them to the discovery in the basement: old recording reels, unlabeled, tucked in a metal cabinet. Most were blank. One had a date: December 30th, 2015, the day after Natalie died. When they played it, the tape hissed, then a soft voice whispered, "Keep the music alive." The player shut off abruptly, mid-sentence. From then on, the house seemed to breathe with sound. The refrigerator hummed in key with distant piano notes. The air vents exhaled faint chords at night. Dana stopped sleeping in the main bedroom, moving her things to the guest room. "She's still working," she said one evening, her eyes tired but calm. "It's not angry, it's lonely." Even Mrs. Kent admitted later she sometimes heard the same music drifting across the canyon, notes carried on the wind, as if Natalie's home itself had become her final studio, still echoing the warmth of a voice that refused to fade. And though Michael eventually sold the house, he left one thing behind: that small photograph of Natalie in her recording booth, smiling, eyes half closed as if she, too, was still listening. The days began to stretch into something uneasy, silent, heavy, as though the air itself had learned to listen. Dana stopped opening the blinds in the studio. The room, once her favorite part of the house, had started to feel like a sealed memory belonging to someone else. The polished piano keys always looked freshly wiped, though she hadn't touched them in weeks. Sometimes, she'd hear the faint tick of the metronome by itself, clicking in slow, deliberate rhythm. Once she'd even found it wound, though she had never learned how to set it. One late afternoon, while Michael was away for work, Dana decided she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted proof or peace. The audio files she'd recorded had become her obsession. She replayed them endlessly, isolating sound frequencies, filtering white noise, hoping to find something human in them. What she found instead was something subtler. On the third recording, under the soft hum of Unforgettable, there was a faint exhale. It wasn't a sigh, it was the sound of breath meeting a microphone, a presence right next to the recording device. That night she stayed awake in the living room, the lights low, every window reflecting her anxious outline. The clock ticked past 2. Outside, the canyon was asleep. No movement, just the wind rustling dry leaves. From the far end of the hallway came a dim light. The studio door was half open, golden light seeping through the crack, moving faintly as if it were candlelight. Dana froze. She had unplugged every lamp that morning. She crept forward, her bare feet brushing the cold wood floor. The smell of tobacco returned stronger now, layered with faint perfume, something vintage and powdery. The closer she came, the more she felt the air shift, denser, almost warm. Through the narrow gap in the door, she saw the faint reflection of someone's shoulder in the glass booth, a woman's silhouette, standing still, facing the microphone. For a long moment, Dana couldn't breathe. The figure wasn't detailed, just an impression of shape and posture, like a memory half revealed by light. The moment she reached for the doorknob, the light cut out completely. Silence followed so deep she could hear her own pulse. When she finally stepped inside, the room was pitch dark except for the tiny green light of the power switch on the mixing board. The faint scent still lingered. She turned toward the mic, still swinging slightly, as though someone had just stepped away. Michael didn't believe her at first. He thought it was exhaustion, stress, or a trick of reflection. But when he tried to prove her wrong, something strange happened. He brought home a portable EMF reader, more curiosity than conviction, and set it on the console. It stayed quiet, the small red light steady. Then, as soon as he said aloud, "If anyone's here, can you let us know?" the reader spiked into a sharp whine. The air around them grew colder, their breaths visible for just a second. They stood in silence, watching the dial flutter wildly before settling back to 0. "Could be interference?" Michael muttered, but his voice trembled. After that night, the house began to develop a rhythm of its own. The music wasn't constant, it came and went, as if guided by memory. Sometimes, around sunset, the faint hum of strings drifted from the vents, like an orchestra warming up. Other nights, they'd wake to the sound of faint tapping, measured, gentle, like a conductor's baton marking time. Mrs. Kent visited once in early spring, bringing lemon bread and quiet eyes. She glanced toward the studio, then whispered. She loved that place more than anything. After her father passed, she'd spend hours down there, recording versions of his songs just for herself. Said it was the only way she could hear him again. Dana listened quietly, a chill crawling through her chest. It made sense now, the loneliness in the melodies, the repetition of the same verses, as though Natalie was calling across time to someone she missed. One morning, Dana found something she hadn't seen before. On the corner of the piano was a sheet of paper, yellowed, faintly wrinkled, with music notations scribbled in pencil. The title read Echo. It wasn't in her handwriting, and the graphite was smudged as though it had been touched recently. That night, unable to resist, she played the notes softly, one hand trembling over the keys. The sound filled the house like a warm breath. For a moment, she thought she heard another piano answering from far away, slightly out of sync, a fraction slower, like an echo returning from another time. Michael came down the stairs and stopped at the doorway, his face pale. "Dana," he said quietly, "look behind you." She turned, and through the glass of the booth, the reflection wasn't hers. It was someone older, graceful. Her lips just barely curved into the faintest, familiar smile. "Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story." Dana's breath caught in her throat. The reflection was too clear to dismiss as imagination. The woman stood behind the glass, her hair softly curled, wearing a light blouse that shimmered faintly as though caught in stage light. Her hands rested on the edge of the console, and her gaze wasn't cold or menacing, it was focused, present. For a few seconds, Dana could only stare, her body refusing to move. She blinked once, and the reflection flickered. The woman tilted her head slightly, almost curious, then vanished as the overhead light hummed back to life. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael stepped forward, trying to mask his fear. It was probably just he began, but stopped. On the glass where the reflection had been, faint condensation lingered, shaped like the outline of a hand, palm open, as if pressed from the inside. Dana reached out slowly, her own fingers trembling as she placed her hand over the spot. It was cold, colder than the glass around it. That night neither of them slept. The house seemed to shift around them, every creak in the wood carried weight. At 3:17 a.m., the sound system in the studio powered itself on. The soft hum of electricity pulsed through the walls, followed by static. Then came a faint voice, distant, looping, "Keep the music alive." It was the same phrase they'd heard on the reel. Only this time, it sounded newer, closer, like someone was whispering directly into the mic. In the following days, Dana began to feel a pull, a quiet insistence to go back into the studio. During daylight, the space didn't feel threatening. It felt expectant, like a room waiting for its next song. She began cleaning it, dusting off the shelves, organizing the old tapes. She found handwritten lyrics folded in notebooks, verses she recognized from Natalie's unreleased recordings. In the margins, little notes in pencil read things like, "Try softer tone," or "Dad's phrasing, keep it warm." The more time she spent in that room, the stronger her attachment grew. She played piano in the afternoons, letting her fingers trace melodies that seemed to come on their own. Sometimes, when she hit the right chord, the faintest shimmer of harmony followed a second note, perfectly tuned, but coming from nowhere. Michael noticed the change. Dana started speaking in softer tones, moving slower, as if listening to something no one else could hear. One evening, he found her sitting at the piano with her eyes closed, smiling faintly. When he asked what she was doing, she said, "She's teaching me." He didn't know what to say. He wanted to help her, to believe her, but the fear inside him was tightening. He reached out to a sound technician, a friend from work, and invited him to test the studio. The man brought professional equipment, EMF detectors, microphones, thermal cameras. They spent hours running diagnostics. Nothing happened until 2:40 a.m., when one of the microphones picked up a faint female voice on loop. 3 words, "Don't erase me." After that night, Dana stopped letting anyone else into the room. She said the energy changed when too many people interfered. Michael protested, but she was insistent. "She doesn't want noise," Dana said. "She just wants peace." One rainy evening, as lightning flickered above the canyon, Michael came home to find the studio lights glowing warm through the storm. The door was locked from the inside. He called her name, no answer. When he finally got it open, the air inside was thick with heat and perfume. Dana was sitting at the piano, playing softly, her face serene. The tape recorder beside her spun slowly, capturing every note. Michael called her again, louder. She stopped playing, turned her head, and smiled in a strange, distant way. "Listen," she whispered. "Do you hear it?" He didn't nod at first. But then, beneath the thunder and the low hum of the piano, came a voice, clear, strong, achingly familiar. Natalie's voice. It wasn't a recording. It was live. It flowed with Dana's playing, perfectly timed, filling the room with warmth so pure it made his eyes sting. And then, just as suddenly, everything cut off. The lights flickered out. The piano went silent. Dana's hands fell into her lap, trembling. When power returned, the reel had stopped spinning. On the tape, one new line was etched in faint black ink. "You finished it." Michael stood frozen by the door. He didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. Dana was staring at the console, her eyes wide and wet, whispering under her breath, "She's gone." But outside, through the storm, The faint sound of humming drifted down the hill, a voice, still gentle, still singing, carried by the rain into the canyon. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the canyon quiet and silver under the thin light of morning. The scent of rain clung to the eucalyptus trees, mixing with the faint trace of smoke that always seemed to linger near the studio. Michael stood outside on the patio, still barefoot, watching the wet earth glisten. Inside, Dana hadn't spoken for hours. She sat at the piano, motionless, her reflection faint in the glass of the sound booth. When he finally stepped inside, she turned toward him slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes had that dazed softness of someone just waking from a dream. "It's done," she said quietly. She left when the song ended. The studio felt different now. The hum that used to hide beneath the silence was gone. The air no longer had that invisible pulse. For the first time in months, the space was still. Michael looked at the tape recorder. The reel sat motionless, the black ink words faint but unmistakable. "You finished it." He wanted to understand what that meant. He played the tape back, expecting only static. Instead, a clear piano melody filled the air, the one Dana had been playing the night before. And then Natalie's voice joined in. It was unmistakable, smooth and warm, her phrasing tender and human. There were no other instruments, just her and the piano, the sound intimate, as though recorded inches from the listener's ear. It lasted only a minute and 12 seconds before cutting off abruptly, the last note hanging in the air like the echo of a goodbye. Dana began to cry, not in shock, but in relief. She just wanted someone to finish it, she whispered. She couldn't back then, but she wanted the song to exist. Michael didn't ask how she knew. He believed her now completely. The tape was proof enough. Natalie Cole had been gone for nearly a decade, and yet her voice was there, alive, singing beside Dana's playing. In the following days, they tried to return to normal life. They opened the windows, aired out the house, packed up some of the tapes they'd found. Dana insisted on leaving the studio untouched. Otherwise, it should stay as she left it, she said. The scent of tobacco faded slowly, replaced by the faint sweetness of dust and rain. The house felt lighter somehow, less haunted, more sacred. But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks later, Dana received an email from a music archivist in Los Angeles. He'd heard from an old friend that the couple living in Natalie Cole's house had found tapes, and he was interested in cataloging them for preservation. When he visited, he listened carefully to the final recording, the one marked Echo. He grew very quiet as it played. Then he said, Natalie had mentioned working on something like this in late 2015. She called it her bridge song. She wanted it to sound like she was singing from one side to another. He looked around the studio, almost reverent. "It's strange," he added softly. "No one ever found a finished version. Until now." Dana let him make a copy. She didn't want to profit from it, she just wanted it preserved. Months later, she received a link to the restored version uploaded to a private archive. The metadata credited both artists, vocals Natalie Cole, piano unknown. She didn't correct them. Still, even as the months passed, the house retained its quiet rhythm. On some nights, usually when the wind swept through the canyon, Dana would sit by the open window and swear she heard faint notes of piano drifting back from the distance. Not eerie, not ghostly, just soft, unfinished chords, as if someone were warming up before another take. Michael, too, felt the difference. The tension that once gripped him had dissolved, replaced by something bittersweet. The haunting hadn't been about fear, he realized. It was about completion, an artist finishing her last line through the hands of someone who listened. They eventually moved out that autumn. Before leaving, Dana placed a small bouquet of lilies, Natalie's favorite flower, on the piano. She left the key to the house on top of the last reel and whispered, "Thank you." As they drove down Benedict Canyon Road, morning light spilling through the trees, the radio in their car flickered once, catching a local jazz station mid-song. For a few seconds, they both froze. Natalie's voice, unmistakable, was singing unforgettable. But there was something different in that version beneath her voice, faint but audible, a piano line just like Dana's. Michael reached to turn the volume up, but as quickly as it appeared, the signal faded to static. They looked at each other, neither smiling, neither speaking, both knowing it didn't matter whether it was coincidence or something more. Somewhere back in the canyon, the old house stood still and waiting, filled with that quiet warmth again. And on nights when the wind rolled through the trees just right, the faint sound of a woman's hum could still be heard drifting down the slope, soft, familiar, and finally at peace. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.